There we go. I can't believe I've gone this entire time, all these videos, and I've never even mentioned the Universal monsters.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
From the 1920s to the 1950s, Universal Pictures was defined and thrived on its use of original, brilliantly made monster movies. Starting with films like the original Phantom of the Opera and eventually working their way into the talkies, the actual official roster of Universal Monsters has changed over time, but it includes classic characters that were repeated often in the Universal films, like Dracula, the Invisible Man, the Wolf Man, basically any random monster you'd see in a crossover with Abbott and Costello.
Yes, Master.
Get me some Dracula.
But if you ask me who is the most definitive Universal monster, I would have to say that it's Frankenstein's monster. And if you ask me what the definitive Frankenstein film is, it ain't the original.
Dr. Steve grows funny creatures, lets them run into the night.
Picking up where the original Frankenstein left off, Bride of Frankenstein begins with Dr. Henry Frankenstein and his monster both surviving the townsfolk's attack. Henry attempts to have a normal life as a baron, but it's almost immediately tempted back into his work after a visit from his mentor, Dr. Pretorius. Doctors Horrible, Insano, and Strangelove were sadly unavailable. Meanwhile, Frankenstein's monster roams the countryside meeting different people along the way, all the while learning the basic aspects of life, from eating to the difference between good and bad and friendship.
Friend. Yes. I want friend. Like me.
He eventually makes his way back to the Doctor through Pretorius himself, and all the while, the Doctors work hard to create a mate for him.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
But much to the creature's sadness, once the creature comes alive, she rejects him immediately.
She hates me. Like others.
The monster allows the Doctor to escape while he overloads the power in the building, killing him, his bride-to-be, and Pretorius. The original Frankenstein is a classic, and it's well-deserved at that. It's got great acting, effects. It set the stage for Universal monster movies for the next God knows how many years. But if there's one thing that makes this movie much better than any of the others, it's the characters. Characters can make or break a horror film, and this one both introduced new characters and makes the originals even better.
No. Don't tell me of it. I don't want to hear. I've changed my mind. I won't do it.
Henry Frankenstein is torn between his knowledge that the process that he created actually works and his urge to live a normal life.
It's blasphemous and wicked. We are not meant to know those things.
It may be that I'm intended to know the secret of life. It may be part of the divine plan.
That's actor Colin Clive reprising his role from the first Frankenstein, and he is just great in this. His facial expressions when he's debating the methods in obtaining materials, his determination while working on the bodies, and that slow, methodical pacing of his voice while he's working is always great to watch.
No, not life itself yet. This is only the simulacrum of life. This action only responds when the current is applied.
Henry's reasoning for continuing his work is really more doing it for science's sake. Pretorius wants to do it for a little bit more of a world-dominating sense.
Create a race, a man-made race upon the face of the earth. Why not?
Yeah, because that idea has always worked for everyone who's tried it. Pretorius is also a great addition to the story because it's believable that Frankenstein would want out after seeing his first project go up in flames in a windmill, and that one was the success.
Alone you have created a man. Now together we will create his mate.
He needed that extra push to play God again, and Pretorius has all the makings of a great puppet master. He has a similar process to Frankenstein. He employs the same type of shady hired goons.
Hired goons?
And he even uses Frankenstein's monster and wife as a minion and a bargaining chip, respectively, to get him back into the field.
I'm exhausted. I must get sleep.
Work. Finish. Then sleep.
I mean, getting Frankenstein's creation to use full sentences is one thing, but kidnapping his wife until their work is done? That's just a poor lab partner.
Good.
But the best moments in the film, and this is no surprise, come whenever the monster is on screen. Any good Frankenstein film shows the audience that despite his appearance, his height, his mannerisms, the creature is much less of a monster than his creator. And even in the original film where he kills the girl, it's done out of misunderstanding and not out of pure rage or evil. He never even maliciously attacks anyone in this movie. I mean, he smacks a couple people around and there's really only one act of aggressive violence, but it's in response to somebody who won't stop screaming after he saves her from drowning.
Don't touch me!
Even his face in the scene is just like, really? There's no pleasing you, is there? They show his affection for music, his gentle but misunderstanding nature, and the fact that, for all intents and purposes, the monster is a damn quick learner.
Drink.
Drink.
Good. Good.
God, it took me years to appreciate wine the way this guy does.
And sent me a friend to be a light to mine eyes and a comfort in time of trouble.
The Hermit is arguably the best character in the film, aside from the monster himself, because he has a full arc. He's lonely and searching for a friend, he finds that friend, and then it ultimately leads to his demise.
My friends, why do you do this?
It's a sad short story in and of itself, with a lot of great moments. Actually, most of the scenes that most people probably saw first and know from Young Frankenstein are lifted directly from this movie. From the violin being able to lead him from place to place, to the old man, to putting on the Ritz.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
Okay, that was all Gene Wilder's idea, but you know what? It was funny. But the monster also gains a certain philosophy in a very short amount of time. He breaks into coffins and crypts so that he could be with the dead, because that's who he feels most connected to.
Made me from dead. I love dead. Hate living.
It's some incredibly introspective, heavy shit. Especially for a monster movie made in the 30s.
Friend?
By the way, you might have noticed that I haven't talked about the bride herself yet, and that's because other than the hairstyle and the fact that she is actually there taking up screen time, she's got nothing going for her. The reveal of her in the dress after being lifted off the gurney is pretty great, but she literally does nothing. She has less than 5 minutes of screen time, and in the end, she just stares blankly ahead and screams. That's pretty much it. Now, the production of this film is well worth talking about. This film used some of the most intricate sets, brilliant makeup effects, and beautiful scores you will ever experience from the early days of Hollywood. Just the scene where the monster wanders through the graveyard, effortlessly transitioning into the crypt below, that's pretty remarkable set building for its time. A review from Variety actually said that the art director, the score composer, and the cameraman have to be featured in the same breath as the actors and director. And yeah, I'll always give Karloff and Whale their due, but details on screen and off really turn this from a good film to a great one.
But I can't leave them, I can't.
Yes. Go. You live.
Now, I talk about censorship a lot in these videos because I feel like in a lot of instances, once a film is released and someone decrees that because they didn't enjoy it, nobody else should, it can rob the movie-going public of a lot of good moments. But it's not just once movies were released that classic horror films were changed, it's during production. The Motion Picture Production Code had an amendment put in place in 1934 that stated that all movie monsters, regardless of their motivations, had to be destroyed by the end of the film. It was kind of their way of emphasizing an actual rule that stated, no picture shall be produced that lowers the moral standards of those who see it. We have Uwe Boll and Adam Sandler movies now, so I'll let you decide for yourself if that code actually works. So alas, we couldn't have Frankenstein's monster or his bride surviving to the end of the picture. Which is a real shame because it was the most human that we ever got to see the monster in any way, shape, or form, and I would argue in any way since. So to see him killed just because of a studio mandate feels, I don't know, cheap? I mean, if it were done any other way, I'd be much more angry because, I gotta tell you, the monster goes out like a boss.
You stay. We belong dead.
Now, I've been singing the movie's praises for the past couple of minutes, but it is not perfect. Aside from a few nitpicky things like its structure and pacing, the whole thing feels a bit campy, even for the 30s.
Oh, I thought I was alone. Good evening.
Dr. Pretorius is a bit too snooty to be taken seriously when he talks, especially in how important he is to the story and Dr. Frankenstein himself.
Bullshit, my dear Baron, is the word for knowing too much.
Not to mention that he started off by building, like, miniature people.
Very bizarre, this little chap. There's a certain resemblance to me, don't you think?
And the doc explains it better than I ever could.
But this isn't science. It's more like black magic.
Yeah, black magic. You forgot stupid and whimsical, but black magic, that explains it too. Also, some of the side characters are really outlandish and crazy, and sometimes it completely takes you out of the atmosphere the movie tries to deliver. These are not establishing characters. These are extras from Blackadder. This woman is probably my favorite because she seems so out of place in everything she does. Oh god, Grandma's off her meds again. Get her off set. Bring her back. Give her a sedative. Also, the movie has kind of a strange framing device. It's basically told from the point of view of Frankenstein's author herself. And
what of my Mary?
She is an angel.
You think so?
wait a minute. That's Mary Shelley? She looks so nice. I know it's well documented that Shelley was more from the upper class than anything, but I don't know. When I think of somebody who's writing the story of a reanimated corpse and the mad scientist that created him, I think of more like a black-haired insomniac. Like every scene in Penny Dreadful where Ava Green's character gets possessed or has visions, that's what I think of. More of a Helena Bonham Carter than a Jane Austen.
It's a perfect night for mystery and horror. The air itself is filled with monsters.
But all in all, what can you say about this movie other than it's a classic? There's a reason it's got a solid 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It was pretty innovative for its time. It gave us one of the most iconic Hollywood character looks in history, even if she didn't really do anything. And it kept Frankenstein well alive into the late 30s and 40s. The Universal horror scene is really interesting to look at, especially if you see how they were not only putting out campy stuff like this, but also really disturbing films like The Black Cat with Bela Lugosi. But if there were one shining example of the whole era, I would put this movie on a pedestal above the rest. Also, it's really cheap. I got it for like $3, so get on eBay and grab a copy for yourself.
Woman. Friend. Why?
Next time, more Stephen King.
Now, don't give me any argument. The ice is gonna break!